Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. I've just been asked to say a few words about the Creative Island Partnership. So my name is Paul Milbank. I work for the Economy Department in the Government of Jersey. And this year we launched a new art strategy. The concept or the main thrust of the new art strategy is the idea of bringing arts and culture not just as a segregated subject or side thing, but into the heart of every part of how we think about society and policy development in government. The art strategy has four main themes. So it looks at the arts through the angle of education and personal development, and how arts, not just as a subject in schools or colleges, but as something that can be used across the curriculum to inspire learning and development. That's the first theme. The second theme is looking at arts and the economy, so how creativity and the cultural life of Jersey can be used to develop from an economic perspective. It also looks at the arts through the lens of thinking about health and well-being. So we know there's plenty of research now that demonstrates that regular involvement in arts and cultural activity has a huge impact on health and well-being. And finally, it looks at the arts in the role of placemaking and in environmental enhancement, which I think is the one that's most relevant to our subject for this evening. So it sets out those four themes and how arts and creativity can be brought to bear across those four areas. And one of the first recommendations of the strategy is to set this thing up called the Creative Island Partnership. Now, the idea of the partnership, there's two main things that it seeks to do. The first thing is it seeks to build a network across the creative sector in Jersey. So anybody who is involved in any way, either directly as a practicing artist or creative, or whose role in any way intersects with arts and creativity, to bring that group of people together for more collaborative working. The other thing it aims to allow government to do is to be better connected to the sector when we think about policy development and the development of the sector. So we are able to invest in the development of the artistic sector. However, we don't belong to it, and there's a danger that without proper consultation and dialogue, we'll be imposing strategy in a top-down way, not properly listening to the aspirations and needs of the creative sector. So the Creative Island Partnership is really important for us as a space where we learn what's going on in the sector and what the needs for development really are. The kind of activity that the Creative Island Partnership is tasked with doing, I've got a very fresh example. So this is from yesterday evening. This is the old library at Victoria College. This was a group that was convened to think about music development. So thinking about the whole music ecosystem in Jersey and how we develop it all the way from music in schools, all the way up to professional music and music in live venues. So thinking about it from the broadest possible perspective, and we had a really engaged group last night thinking about how we do that work together, how government can create the right kind of policy environment for music to flourish. And it was just so good to be connected to a group of really passionate people working in their particular sector and how we might be able to help. So the Creative Island Partnership fragments into these kinds of working groups to look at particular themes. So essentially, I want to invite you to consider joining if your role in any way intersects with art and creativity in this way. We'd love to have you as a part of this. And there are different work streams and different working groups, like this music one, that you may find yourself interested to be involved with. So if you just go on the government website and look at Creative Island Partnership, it's a very simple joining process, and we'd love to have you involved. So great to be able to support this event. We'd love to see more of this sort of thing happening. Lovely to see this platform developing and audiences growing, and we look forward to many more interesting talks of this nature. I'll just hand back to Alison. Thank you.
Hi, I'm so delighted to have so many people here tonight from such, a different audience. It's great. This is exactly what we're trying to do. Actually, Paul didn't mention that part of his Creative Island Partnership is they're doing lots of work with public. There is a fund where things can be developed, so especially the public realm, which obviously as architects we're all engaged in. So I urge all the architects here to join. And then, if we have projects and things that we would like, we can actually perhaps do something rather than all the talking that we all seem to be doing lots of. Anyway, so this is part of our 6 Big Things to Talk About series. And the 6 big things are actually completely everything to do with this talk. So they are, she says, looking, this is when I realised that I haven't got my glasses. No, no, it's the contacts and the, but yes, so it's context, climate, connectivity, community. Thank you. I'm sure it's not that, but oh no, this has been videoed as well. How embarrassing. Anyway, no, so it's climate, connectivity, community, context. So it's exactly what Shelley is going to talk about. So I think, as an island, we're trying to be, heading towards sort of carbon neutrality, and we all know that transport is one of the major things. So it's very exciting to hear what's going on. So the Dutch Cycling Embassy, I mean, if you please, honestly, if you follow them on LinkedIn or anything, their posts are just incredible. So they're a team of 8, and they travel all around the world advising cities and places how to do, how to do things. So I think I could waffle on for ages, but I think probably we all want to listen to Shelley. So thank you very much for coming over.
Yes, so that's something to live up to, of course, if I need to fulfill all the C's, but I will do my best, and I'm delighted to be here. Thanks a lot for inviting me, both for the combination of the Creative Island Partnership and the Association of Jersey Architects. I feel very welcomed, and I'm pleased to be here, and exciting that you're spending your free time on coming over and listen and think along. So I did prepare a presentation for you all, and it's about, as already mentioned, and I'm from the Dutch Cycling Embassy, so it is about cycling, but you will hear way more. Please, as Mike also said, if you have any questions or thoughts you want to share, reach out to me after the presentation, but there will also be time during this hour to ask them. I will keep an eye on my time because there's much to talk about. And maybe for a brief context before I start diving into it, the first time I really got an interaction with people from Jersey was in 2019, when your former Minister of Infrastructure with some of his staff came actually to the Netherlands to see and experience cycling there. And I was invited to talk about cycling and education. So that is the seed where it started. And then just before the pandemic started, I was invited back over here. So that was the first time I saw the island. We cycled around. I learned a lot about your policies. And I've been back just before your last elections this spring. So I've been coming back and forth and had the opportunity to also see what has been changing lately. So I think that's also very exciting that I see that there's work done and there's changes being made. And of course, I'm very eager to contribute to that even more. For the conversation today, I thought being invited by architects, I will focus on placemaking, because I think that's what architects do a lot. You create a place which attracts people and excitement. But of course, it will be with the mobility perspective. So I hope everyone will enjoy that. And the first part will be focusing more on visioning and thinking about where you want to go to. The second part will then be more focused on this mobility perspective. And then the last part will be sharing ideas and lessons and knowledge from my Dutch background. So to start with the visioning, sometimes if you think about the future, or if you have been ever in a work group indeed thinking about, what can happen, if we are in the mobility field or in the urban field, loads of people talk about driverless, cars that drive by themselves, packages being flow to people directly, automatically. And you can kind of see these nice sketches, these visionary sketches about how the world could look like. Found it always very interesting, because it's always interesting to think about where you want to go, right? You need to have a vision. You need to know where you're going. But sometimes we also see this in the mobility world. So we see those self-driving cars, and it's a bit ironic because there's someone on a home trainer in that vehicle, you know? Well, you can even also do that without that vehicle. So that's why the question mark, like, is this the future we are aiming for? I mean, we have so many bright people, we could do better than this. And I'm glad, I think you're agreeing with me, because it made you laugh. And then the future with the question mark and exclamation mark, because sometimes we're so busy with our current things in lives that we don't look around and we don't stand still and we don't take that moment to create that vision. And it's fully understandable, because I think it's always good to be hardworking, and I totally get it, and you're passionate about what you're doing during the day. But it's also important to take your moments and to reflect and think about where you want to go to. And yeah, for me, this is one of the cartoons that makes you realize that sometimes there's knowledge around the corner, but you're not getting it because you're focused on your inbox, which is full with emails which you need to answer. So I would like to ask you to take some time, and you're already here, so you're already relaxed after your long work day, and think about, okay, where should we go in the future? And to give you some inspiration, you can see on this sheet, it is a busy intersection. Look at it, see the different materials which are there, see the different modes which are there, see the surroundings. Just look at it and also start to imagine a bit what could be different, or how would it be to walk there, or how would it be to cycle there, or how would it be to live there and have children going to school. Like, have a thought about it. And then I'm curious if someone might knows where this is. Yeah. Oh, yes. I'm not sure. I can't read it myself, but I think you're already in a good direction of Asia. And it's indeed in Japan, Tokyo. My director was there at the start of the year, and we made this animation for them. So I will start it shortly. And we asked the creative designer to think about this intersection and show what you can do with it. You might have seen these kind of cartoons or images before, but yeah, it's to show where it could go to. I hope some of you also had creative ideas the past minutes. And of course, this change went very quickly, and this is not how change often happens. But it is possible. It is possible to change, right? Also, the previous picture, it's all a construct that we create with each other, and we can recreate that construct. And I think if you now think about, do you want to walk there? Do you want to cycle there? Would you like to live there? Yeah, I think for loads of people this looks way more inviting than the previous one. And to take it from there, and okay, maybe this is a nice example. This is Tokyo. Why are you bringing this example up? Because we are here in Jersey. Yes, true. So let's take this idea of getting out of the box back to Jersey. And in preparation of this evening, I also read through some of your policies, and I need to say it correctly. It was the Bridging Jersey plan. Is that correct? Sorry? Bridging island plans. Thank you. I knew it was kind of somewhere in the area. But I read like very exciting stuff. I know it's policy, so maybe not everyone gets excited about it. But I mean, the content which is there is really, really good. So I'm very pleased to see that. And it was also in 2019 when I first met people from Jersey in the Netherlands. I think something that triggered was the carbon neutral strategy in 2018, if I remember that correctly. And that's where I'm getting to focus a bit more on Jersey, because there's a very interesting professor from the University of Leeds who gave a presentation quite recently. It's on YouTube, and he said the famous lines, or I thought them interesting. He works for the place-based carbon calculator. I have no relations with him, although it seems like I'm promoting his tool, but you can find it, and it's very interesting. And he did research. If you want to decarbonize, where do you need to start? It's also in your policy, so there's a correlation there. But he said, if you really expect to meet net zero, then you expect a rapid and substantial decline in car use. Of course, if you talk about decarbonization, there's way more than only traffic, but car use and personal traffic is really, really huge into this. So we will dive into it a bit more. And thinking also about the future where we want to go, does the future that we envision also include that decarbonization? And if you think about more flying stuff or self-driving cars, they are still powered by a source of energy which needs to be sourced. And it's interesting. What about cycling then? Because cycling is the energy comes from the human body. So yeah, you still need to fuel that with sandwiches and peanut butter, but it's very human based. And for me, it's so interesting that if you talk about the future, that the cycling is often forgotten. And of course, it's not only about cycling. For me, it's all kinds of active travel. So also walking, and it benefits not only the climate by using less carbon, but for me, active mobility becomes as exciting or as interesting, because it's also good for loads of other reasons, among others, for example, health, or if you talk about placemaking. And to continue with that is that we see cycling in the Netherlands as a tool to tackle multiple issues where we're currently dealing with nowadays. This might look a bit dramatic, but I do think you recognize it. And for me, because you're an island, I was, okay, this is the picture to look at. Because, you will have a problem as well, as you are mostly aware, that if something is really going to happen, you need to take care of yourselves. So there are waves coming to us, and the cycling can really be a tool to deal with that. As I do see some recognizable faces in the audience, and some are completely new, for some of the group, maybe some of the information will already be very familiar, and please then zoom out a bit. But for those that are for the first time thinking about cycling, about this in such a depth, there are so many reasons which you can find why cycling adds to a future-proof world. And this is a summary. There's way more. We have made a Dutch cycling vision where you can all find the statistics, but I will just get some benefits out of it. One which I also already briefly mentioned is health. For me, it's very, very important. We see around the world, unfortunately, that more and more people are getting less in shape because sitting behind the desk more and more, and having access to more and more unhealthy food. And it seems like it's difficult to limit ourselves with that. And we really see in the Netherlands, because so many people have cycling incorporated within their daily activities, that, for example, obese rates in the Netherlands are way behind quite some other countries. And I'm sure that cycling connects to that. So also from the health perspective, it's a very interesting one. Also, another one I would like to pick out is that the Dutch children are known to be very happy children. And we often link that at a very young age, they receive a lot of freedom, because it's very common in the Netherlands that children start cycling to see their friends or go to the playground themselves. And of course, as a parent, you will only do that if you feel safe when your child is doing that, because otherwise you will feel all concerned. We consider it as safe, and children really feel like, oh, they have some free choice of freedom. They can make their own plan. They come back from playing with their friends by themselves, and it ends to that when children go to secondary school in the Netherlands, almost everyone cycles there themselves with a group of their friends. So it's also a social and fun activity. And I think that's also very interesting to link that to cycling. And you can also read about clean air, of course, and it can also be a very efficient way. Concerning efficiency is that also if you talk about your public space, often we want to do loads of things in our public space because we want to have greenery, we want to have water, we want to have the place where people can meet, we want to have terraces for our businesses to thrive. But what we also say is that you can park at least 10 bikes on one car parking spot. So it's a very efficient way to deal around. So also I think when you're in the urban planning area, it's just an exciting, creative thing to work with. And then there are also quite some statistics, for those that are interested, that in the Netherlands it's shown that cyclists shop more often and they spend less than when someone goes once in a while, but because they go more often and they spend less, it adds up together and they spend more in the end, if you could follow that. Because as you can imagine, although with all the cargo bikes it's kind of changing, but often people on bikes don't bring as much goods as when you're driving with your car, because you then do your weekly family shopping in one go. But with your bike, you do it more in bits. And then we also know that businesses are very good in selling. So every time you walk in, sometimes people buy something that maybe in the end they didn't need it. So for example, if you do shoppings just before dinner, you end up with a bar of chocolate as well, because you are already looking for food. So there are quite some very good statistics on that cycling can also really benefit your society in an economic way, besides all the climate and health perspectives. Okay, so we talked about what kind of vision do we foresee, and I'm really saying, like, please include cycling in the vision of your future. But how are you going to do that then? And here's my bridge to placemaking, because if we talk about cycling, if we talk about mobility, it takes place in your streets, in your public space. And as I said before, public space is often limited because you want to do loads of different things in your public space. This is an example of Amsterdam, where you can really clearly see that the public space is dedicated for users of the residents in that neighborhood. It almost feels like it's their front yard. It's an extension almost of their house, but then in collaboration with their neighbors. And I would say it's a very nice and friendly design. Like, for me, this is also typical Amsterdam, old and historical. For me, it gives a nice feeling, and I also connect to, okay, I've been in Amsterdam before, I've lived there, and I can picture myself there. But unfortunately, in the real world, if we look towards the future, we can really envision it, and we can see this picture, and we see, okay, this looks nice. But you might also have the question, we cannot do this with every street, not because we don't have the space, but also because we don't have the resources. So sometimes you get something different, which is kind of similar, but then, of course, differently designed. This was an initiative during the COVID pandemic, and it's called in Dutch Vakantiestraat, which is holiday street or vacation street. You might recognize that in it. And the idea is that people were not allowed to travel that much, so you are going to have holidays in your own street. So this was really a pop-up way, or a tactical urbanism way, to claim that public space back from, to claim the streets. And it was an initiative from the organization Humankind, which is based in the city of Rotterdam. And the city of Rotterdam actively got involved into it. So yes, I think designing-wise, it looks, for me, less attractive than the previous picture. But I think what you're aiming for, or what your target is getting on the same line, because the people are able to get out of their houses and enjoy themselves in the public space. There has been quite some research on, okay, placemaking, how do we do it? This graph I find interesting from the US. And I also saw this one, which is in your policy papers, and I thought, oh, they look very similar. So again, in your policies, you quite have the basis for, okay, how do we make that placemaking? And important for me to share as well, and I think that's in between the Connect theme, that most of your public space is actually streets. And I found a number that almost 80% of all your public space is used as a street. So it's used for people to travel around, which I find incredible high. So please, if you found any other sources, let me know. And I'm also curious how the space divide is in Jersey. But think about that 80% of your space is dedicated for people traveling through, rather for the people living there or shopping there. Or so it's way more the movement going through the flow rather than being there. So for me, if you talk about placemaking, the mobility aspect is essential and needed to deal with. And there I will show you some topics on, and I will show you some examples where I feel you can create that placemaking by looking at your streets. And this will be a bit analyzing what you're seeing. So as said, we're going to focus on the street. This is also Amsterdam, I realize. And just look at it, like the space you have between the row of houses and another row of houses. It's indeed quite wide, I would say. And you see that indeed most of the space of this public space is the street. It's either for the cars, it's for the bikes, it's for the pedestrians, it's for parked cars, it's for parked bikes. You luckily see some green, so that I think that gives a nice atmosphere. And I would say it looks attractive, it looks urban, but it could be more place-makes, I would say. But why I wanted to show you this one is the difference in materials used for the different types of modes using the streets. And I was very pleased to this afternoon when I had a chance to already cycle around to see that I see more diversity in materials which you are using in Jersey at the moment as well compared to some time before. But because there are reasons why in the Netherlands we use certain types of materials. Of course, it's due to cost, but also to what kind of feel it gives. For me, you see the pedestrian path is with bricks, then it's asphalt, then it's bricks, then it's asphalt. So there's a change in that, and that shows something, that tells something. And asphalt is very much known to show that it's smooth and nice. So that's why cars really like it. And I would say cyclists like it quite often as well. So I agree with the asphalt in this bit, but I'm also happy that you see some variety and you see the bricks. And yeah, that it's not all the same. To continue on this one is that you can really, really play with all the different materials which are there. Like there are companies full which can make the most creative things. It also depends on your handbook. But you can really play with it. And this is also making place by the design which you're having there. I just had a conversation earlier on. It's often not about just putting a sign there. This is the speed limit, how hard to drive. For me, only the material in between shows cyclists, whoa, if you're on the pedestrian path, you will feel it because it will get a bit bumpy. And it shows that you shouldn't drive there. And if it gets a bit bumpy, it means you also definitely should slow down. So that I find an interesting feature to share. Another thing is, of course, the reddish, pinkish asphalt that we're using consistently for every separated bike facility. So that means that always if you see pinkish, reddish asphalt, you know as a cyclist where to go. I don't think there are really academic research why it should be pink reddish. It's more that it is continuously the same everywhere. So you can experiment with another color, but just do it then everywhere that same color, because that helps people to understand where they need to be and what they need to do. Another one which I find very interesting, and it's really getting into to the details and seeing which materials are used. There is an exit construction going on here, so you see a main route for cars, and then they need to give priority to the cyclists. This is a common thing in the Netherlands, and you can only see it by the raised bits. So the bit between the wheels of the car is slightly raised, which will notify the car user that he's exiting the road. There's no sign showing this, but by this raise, he will, or she, or it will feel it. And there's enough space as well that the car can park there and wait and let the rest of the traffic flow, and the cyclist can flow. So it's a whole communication going on here, and it's all by design. It's all by which materials you use, which guidelines you use. And you see one sign, and that is the blue round sign with the bike on it. That is a sign for the of the cycling path. But besides that, this all goes by design and people scanning each other and seeing each other. And this exit construction really, really works. And we sometimes also refer to it as a gate, which you enter or exit when, for example, entering a neighborhood or entering a shopping area. So there are all these small, minor design tools which you can use. The next one which I want to show is this one. And my question is, all the pictures before this were pictures from the Netherlands. And I just wonder if you can recognize where this one is. There are not so many clues in this one. The Tokyo one was much easier. England, yeah, could have been. At least I think I already gave away it's not the Netherlands, right? So that was maybe not the best way to phrase it. But all the pictures I've shown you before are the Netherlands, and of course you can copy paste this. Because this is not rocket science, you know. If you understand, okay, which materials to use and what kind of regulations to need. This is in Vilnius, the capital of Litouwen in Dutch, but then Lithuania in English. Thank you very much. There has been a very, very active civil servant pulling things off like crazy. And now you could almost say this is the Netherlands, because due to the reddish, pinkish asphalt and due to the separation and due to the different materials, we would almost recognize it as this the Netherlands. And I found this very, very exciting because it shows that also the change is possible. To go back to the focus on the streets, and I see I have quite some examples, so I might go through it a bit quicker. In the Netherlands, when roads are traffic calmed, we don't use asphalt that much, or almost never, unless there are important reasons, such as emergency vehicles which need to go there. Sometimes there can then be, can be all kinds of regulations. But when it's traffic calmed, we use bricks, especially because the bricks also enforce the traffic calming. And for me, it gives an interesting pattern as well. Another one I want to show you is, of course, you can also start become a bit more creative with more climate adaptive or green approaches, because why do we have to service everything? Where did we start that we're going to have bricks and asphalt everywhere? It's not needed, in my opinion. And especially if you park a car, it's not needed as well. If you want to have more inspiration to this very climate-proofing, Nanda Sluismans, and I'm happy to share it later on. She's an architect in my area, and she is very active with sharing this online. So where the Dutch Cycling Embassy is very active with sharing loads of cycling-related pictures, she is really more on the climate stuff. And another one which I want to share is a very small street which is still not fully paved. And this one is also from Nanda. And this is actually like a wadi. So once it rains very hard, the water goes into the grass and you have a little more like a pond creating. But this is also by softening your surface. It creates a certain type of place, or at least for me. And it also really benefits the climate, so it can also really work as a co-production. And I'm sure you recognize this one. I think this is a very nice example. And you also see it, how the people are using it. People are walking, people are enjoying themselves, people are out and about. And I think this is what you want to envision when talking about the future. And I have some other examples. They are maybe outdated because I did went on a very nice bike ride this afternoon, but I couldn't incorporate a new picture straight away. But I think this is, for me, a very nice example where you use the different kinds of material on the intersection. And why you want to do that? Because at an intersection you want to slow down, because also this is sidetrack, more mobility related, but at the intersection is the place where the most collisions happen because people intersect. So that is the most unsafe place to be. So you want at intersections that the speed is as low as possible. And one way to do it is by designing it like this. So I think this is a very nice example. Another example, which for me gives a completely different feeling. This is one stretch of asphalt, kind of from one garden to another garden. Yeah, it does something different for me as well with this one, especially because unfortunately for you guys, there was exactly at the moment when taking the picture also a van parked at the pedestrian path, so it doesn't look very exciting, I would say. But of course, maybe you are way more used to this and you are just feel like, oh, this is just fine. But I think there could be other things. And coming back to that asphalt bit, I just want to give it as a takeaway. This is also asphalt, but then with a street print on it. So it's completely asphalt. It is, their move is how they make it, but you can print the bricks in it. So it's not the same for water drainage, but it's a cheap way to do it. It's also, I'm happy to connect you. And interesting in this one, you can also see they just did it. They on purpose kept the sides smooth. And that is to prioritize cyclists, so you can give them a smooth way to go. But if you're a car, you will feel the friction of this fake bricks. Yeah, if you start thinking creative, I'm sure you can come up with tons of solutions how to make nice places from your streets. To continue my story, and I will go a bit faster. Now I'm getting into, okay, but what happened in the Netherlands and why are you listening to me with this Dutch background? So in the Netherlands, I will show you some before and after pictures. In the Netherlands, we were also very, very car-minded. We still are, but we did change our streetscape. We did change our public space. On the left-hand side at Amsterdam, Haarlemmerstraat, very nice street, just on the right side when walking from Amsterdam train station Centraal. A very busy shopping street, like a very nice area. And it was full with cars in the 60s, 70s. And now it's all pedestrianized and all for cyclists. And of course, this wasn't a change in one go, but I think if you look at the pictures side by side, it's, for me, I would say one of the pictures looks a bit more inviting. The other one is from Rotterdam. Here you could see they put separated bicycle infrastructure in. Immediately they also thought about bringing green in, so you can combine that. And you see that the stretch of asphalt for the cars is really, really limited compared, or it's a bit more limited than in the previous picture. Another example, and there are tons of examples, but I just want to show you that indeed this change is possible. It's in The Hague, again a big shopping street, and they pedestrianized it with a shared zone for cycling. Yes, this also in the Netherlands we sometimes have shared zones, but there can also arise issues with. And the tram line, if you were thinking, oh, where did that one go? Did they get rid of all public transport? Is underneath the ground. So it's still there. But it was a major thing to do, of course. Another example, Rotterdam, you can see the difference in green and the amount of space for cycling. This is Amsterdam, well, a complete change in the Pijp, a very well-known neighborhood for a cafe or for pubs. And you see it attracts people, etc. All that I've been talking about before. Another example, Rotterdam, Koolsingel, very famous place, especially for people which are into football. Because if the Rotterdam club wins, they're going to celebrate it here. It's where the city hall is. On the left-hand side is the city hall. It was 2 tracks of cars one way and 2 tracks the other way. So actually 4. And they limit that to only one way both ways. Therefore, they created space for cycling. And Rotterdam thought, we do something differently. We're going to have yellow asphalt, which I'm personally not a big fan of, but it looks nice on the pictures, for sure. So these are kind of examples from before and after, and with everything that I've been talking about, like if you change the materials, if you change the amount of space, you can make the place with changing the streets. So yes, the Netherlands made this change, and sometimes people feel like the Netherlands was always very much into cycling, which is not true because we really had to make this change. And this is also an overview of cities and their cycling rates, in the past and nowadays. And you actually see that across Western Europe, cycling rates were really, really high. And it was not only in the Netherlands that they went down after the Second World War. And luckily, yes, they went up in the Netherlands a lot. But it's a change to be made. And everyone can make that change. And please don't think because everyone cycles in the Netherlands because we have nice weather all the time, because that's also not true. So please, you can think about excuses why this cannot happen, but I'm ready here to give counter arguments for almost everything. I'm seeing that the time is going fast, which is a good sign, but there are still some slides I will quickly show you. One major contribution to the change was a policy implemented in the early 90s, which is called, if translated, sustainable safety. And one of their pillars was the attractiveness. And why I wanted to show it to you is because it also links to placemaking. So it says quieter streets, parks, water. The route needs to be attractive. There needs to be street lighting, very, very important. And street art is also mentioned, so it's nice that it collides. And for example, the city of Eindhoven, which is famous about being a technical city, and also with Philips and the lamps. So they did a lot of art with lamps everywhere, which is also very social shape, but also with loads of local artists. And the routes are way more attractive if we do that in that way. Here is a sheet full of numbers. And this is to show if you make that change, loads of positive things happen. So you might need to go to a difficult period, but after that, we have more bikes than people, as it's famously shared by more and more people. But we also have that in loads of cities, more people use the bike for short distances than the car. So it was a really change also in mode shift. Very interesting, where I can talk about for hours, is that we have a reverse gender gap. So in the Netherlands, more women cycle than men. Well, everywhere else in the world, more men cycle. Very interesting one. Happy to talk about it more. And also we have a reverse age gap. So more elderly people cycle than young people. So they still feel fit and safe to do that. Our public transport system is really based and focused on cycling. So you can make this train of sustainable transport, very much recommended, and loads more to talk about. Then, very brief, I think, some tips I would like to give from our experience in the Netherlands. If you start working on making a change, and I know loads of you are already working on the change, it's really exciting. But still something always I hold my heart, if that's an English expression, I'm not sure, but at least in Dutch. When I cycle sometimes here, and especially, for example, on the roundabout, but also in other places, we call this unprotected and protected intersections, and this is very much about safety. The Dutch are famous about almost every intersection is protected. This means that there's a barrier between the other road users, and as said, collisions often happen there. Definitely something I think working on placemaking also take this in keep this in mind. To add, when you start thinking about the intersection, it's of course also important to think about the network level, because in that way you make sure everyone can reach every place by themselves. And we always say that every bike plan also needs a car plan, because it needs to coexist with each other, and you can just not do one and the other not. That will not work. It's also about being friends and looking at the street and which mode needs to be where. And maybe the final one as a takeaway from the Netherlands is that we have two different words for cycling or people on bikes, besides that they are all human, of course. But we see a difference into sports cycling and the people, just a person that is on a bike and traveling from one place to another. And for me, also, if you look into it, it's about how people are positioned, but it's also about what they wear and how they behave. And I think, this would be very interesting if the change can be made in Jersey as well. And it's not only that one woman, it's not an exception. You will see all kinds of different people on bikes, different backgrounds, different ages, as said, different abilities, all kinds of people. And I think that is the most exciting part of or cycling knowledge in the Netherlands. There's way more to talk about, but I will close or get it too close, and otherwise I can always continue the sheets for a bit. But as a closure, I of course want to say thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you got some new inspiration and things to think about. We from the Dutch Cycling Embassy fully exist to share cycling knowledge around the world. And we do this in different steps by giving these kind of presentations, but also by experiencing cycling in the Netherlands yourself. So if you're ever interested, feel free to reach out. And we do also workshops and all kinds of knowledge sharing. And as said, we are with a team of 8, but luckily we're not just 8, we are a network, and we have over 95 partners which can help us with thinking along. So I wanted to show them as well. And I think then it's time, if there are any, time for questions. Yes, I see a hand. Yes, for me.
I'll ask one to get it going. You have very wide streets in the Netherlands, and so you can afford to give up some space. We generally don't. And I just wondered what your advice would be in areas where we have much more constrained road space and much opportunity to widen the roads.
Yes. I think then it's, of course, making the decision, what kind of space do you have and who gets the right to that space, or how are you going to prioritize it. And of course, this one is a bit funny, but we have very old historical city centers with also small roads, and they are often pedestrianized or for cycling. So that is our way to deal with it, because you cannot fit everything in. On the other hand, you also need to have that car plan and that bike plan as set. So there's a lot of traffic circulation. So one-way routes with a counterflow cycling, and of course two sides pedestrians as well. But for me, looking at the city center, I know you have some of them, but I think you could do way more in cutting certain streets, that it's no route for true traffic, but only for traffic that has the destination there, but always a true route for cycling and walking. And I think you could do this in your neighborhoods. You just need to identify your main routes. And I know you also don't have so many roads, which I think I think that can also be a benefit rather than a challenge. But it's identifying which are the routes, which are the main car network, and which will be the main bike network and the main pedestrian network. And important to share that your main car network doesn't have to be the same for your bike network. Ideally, it's not the same, because it's way nicer to cycle on a quiet street than besides a busy road, if that makes sense. So it's making decisions, and they can be very, very hard and difficult. Yeah, it's playing with your space and prioritizing. Yeah, thank you.
Shelley, we do have a lot of narrow roads in St Helier.
Yeah.
We've also got one extremely wide road.
Yes.
That separates St Helier from the waterfront and the
Yeah.
highways. You must have thought about that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I wonder if you find that road attractive. But then I also feel like it's your main route. So you need to keep it probably for your main routes. Yeah, for me, and what I wanted to share still, maybe I can get it quickly. What we do, we go overseas, as said, and we went to Austin in Texas to do a workshop like with concrete cases and planning a network, etc. 10 years later, our queen came there to cycle there, so that was a big success. And other examples. And my question was like, oh, maybe Jersey can also be such a example for the road. You know, you've also been a group of you to the Netherlands. We've coming back and forth and making that next step. And I think some of the pictures are the main route, and some things are also changing. But which one I was looking for is this one. If I have to take the freedom to turn it on. So this was rush hour 2.5 years ago. Yeah, I found this horrible. Sorry. Because you're besides a traffic jam. And then at the same time, it's inspiring because there's enough space for loads of people to cycle. And the traffic jam will there only be during rush hour, you know. So you have two-way roads, both directions, only for rush hour. And after that, they go back into one-way street as well. So yeah, the main routes, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, whoa. Yes.
I'm not an architect.
Yeah.
So the question is actually for the architects in the room, because you look at that cycle track on the right-hand side, and I've been commuting on it for 15 years, and it's been bits of it being built many times. And you say, quite correctly, that is not rocket science to signpost the pedestrians from the cyclists.
Well, but
we absolutely fail to do that. So can someone in the audience tell me why our solution is just gallons of white paint rather than putting...
I think this might also be a question for the drinks a bit, but for me, being here, so I was here just before the COVID pandemic, and this video is also from then. And I had the luxury to cycle with someone from Cycle for Jersey today, which picked me up from the airport, and we cycled literally into town. I think this is the best tourist attraction which you can ever have, by the way, and I will definitely, we're planning on cycling back to the airport tomorrow as well. But I see the improvements. I can imagine that you are, the people that are really into it feel perhaps frustrated because it doesn't go fast enough and maybe not as high quality as you want. But for me, I see the improvements, and also I think it's not striving for the best, but having this bits in, and it is a development. So, yeah, I was quite pleased, to be honest, but of course it can be better. But then it's also the question, are you going to improve this main route for cycling people there? Or as often heard, something to the east or something into the city center? Of course, you need to make decisions. I think also focusing on schools would be very interesting and important. So, yeah. But please ask your questions to those who want to have the conversation as well. And I'm happy to continue the conversation later on as well. I saw more questions. Yeah.
Yes, so 2 points, both relating to your slide.
Yeah.
I noticed you had Copenhagen as the lowest number of fatalities per 10,000 cycle journeys on there. My nephew's just qualified as an architect and is working in Copenhagen for Gell Associates who do the sort of sustainability transport exercises all over the world.
Yeah.
And in his office of 25 people, nobody commutes by car in Copenhagen.
Yeah.
I asked him to send me a photograph of his rush hour the other day, and I could see 3 cars in the background and everybody else on bicycles. And those who do live further out, exactly as one of your other slides, people cycle to the railway station. They put their bike on the train for free, because you can put your bike on any form of public transport for free.
Yeah.
And then they get off at the railway station, then cycle into
Yeah.
the office. So it's...
You want my reflections on this?
just well, if I can
Yeah.
to make my second point,
Yeah.
which is a more political one, you had the Freedom for Children, another of your slides, and then later on had the split between men and women cycling.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure you know the history of cycling. Back in Victorian times in the UK, there were bicycles on the road before cars.
Yes, of course.
The first road signs were for cyclists, not for cars. But there was a lot of resistance against cycling because it promoted the emancipation of women.
Yeah, I hope we don't have resistance to that anymore.
Hopefully that's a thing of the past.
Yeah.
But how do you see that panning out?
Interesting observations. And of course, Copenhagen and Denmark is very well known about cycling as well. I'm not sure if you ever tried to compare it to the Netherlands, but let's also keep that as a discussion for the drinks. And for Copenhagen, unfortunately, or Denmark, I think their politicians has been lately changed. Maybe check that with your son as well. Not in the good direction for cycling. So I think maybe the COP of 29 actually pushed a lot for cycling, and it feels like now Denmark is losing it a bit, but that are my predictions. Question about women and cycling. Yes, I think the main reason why there are so many women cycling in the Netherlands, because we're actually quite a conservative country. We're luckily changing that, but I always feel like the Anglo-Saxon world was a bit more liberal. So it's in the Netherlands, it comes back from that the men were having a driving license and owned a car, and therefore the women started cycling and do the groceries and bring their children to school, bring them to daycare, bring them to sports at a certain age they could do it by themselves. So for me, it's actually something that it comes from a conservative background, and I'm happy to see that change. But I know that my grandparents, for example, when my grandpa passed away, my grandma never had a driving license. So then she had to fall back to public transport and the bike. But then it's great that you have those alternatives. So yeah, I think the whole gender debate is interesting and luckily still developing. So in the Netherlands, more and more women are working, which is great. I saw 2 questions at the back and then 2 here. Yeah, the full back one, the gentleman. Yeah.
I thought as there were, I'm sure, many architects in the room, you focused a lot on the public realm.
Yeah.
But to drive behaviour change, as there are architects here, I think the focus on end-of-journey facilities is really important as well. I used to be chief exec of the Tour of Britain, which is Britain's biggest cycling race. And I went to see Airbus in Bristol, and they have 4,500 staff, 1,500 of which cycle to work every day. And I went to see them to ask them for money to help sponsor the race, and it was there. And they said to me, we'll give you £10,000 with the greatest of pleasure, because cyclists are our most efficient and high-performing staff with the lowest level of absenteeism. And they said, actually, we're trying to make the next 1,500 of our 4,500 staff, the next 1/3, into cyclists. And they were doing that by building incredible end-of-journey facilities, where when you arrive at work, you are a superstar, because you get a dry towel, you get shampoo.
Yes.
Your bike doesn't have to sit out in the rain all day long. And they built these incredible facilities. I'm talking that can cater for hundreds of people arriving at work at the same time every single day. And I don't see that happening in the built environment in Jersey. Great facilities. Now, I've only lived here for the last 2 months. I cycle and run in one way. I run in the morning in some Brellards, and then I cycle home in the evening. The last 3 weeks, as most of you can probably attest, I was about 10 yards out of my front door before I was wet through to the skin. But you don't mind if you get to work and you've had a bit of exercise and you've got somewhere to shower and change and get a dry towel. But I think that's actually the exception, not the rule, unless you're in a superstar trust company with more money than they know what to do with. So I would encourage the architects to get focused on end-of-journey facilities, because that is how you drive behavioural change, and get arriving at work wet and being able to put your bike somewhere dry and get a dry towel is half of the solution. It's not all about changing all of our roads and things like that. It's about being able to also get into dry clothes at the end of the day and cycle home and what have you.
Yeah, thanks for adding. Yeah. And you're completely right. And I know of a contest in the Netherlands where employers show their facilities, and there's an award to win who has the best bike-friendly facilities. You could set that up and make a competition out of it. But it's more that in my presentation I couldn't cover everything. It was very much focused on the public space by purpose. But yes, this is a very interesting topic, and I'm sure things can be changed about that in the Netherlands, or in Jersey as well, yeah. Then just the women in front of the last speaker, yeah.
There's two big issues for Jersey. One is the gentleman behind me has cycled from St. Brás to St. Helier. Now, if you take your elderly population, of which you said in Holland is a very high percentage of cyclists, your average elderly person is not going to cycle from St. Brás to St. Helier.
No. Yeah.
So it then raises the question, which is something that scratch my head up a lot, is everything has to become more localised on the road. So that in St. Brás is slightly better that you can cycle to the shops readily, but so then the other parishes have to have more parish centres.
Yeah. I think it's in your plans. There was a chapter places with a map identified which places you're going to focus on. But yes, having facilities nearby is essential to make it walking and cycling distance. That was also the core of the Dutch urban planning. For a very long time, for example, it was not allowed to build supermarkets outside city centers because you didn't want to lose those customers for your local shops. You didn't want to have them travel there by car. There's much behind it. On the other hand, with the e-bike, we see an immense increase of elderly people traveling long distances. And my grandma did travel by e-bike till we said, like, okay, now you need to stop. But it gave her also the freedom to still see places. But yeah.
But so what we've seen in Japan is supermarkets have dominated, and they drag people from the island to the island. You have to all go by car.
Yeah.
Possibly cycle. So we need to, from a planning perspective, we need to log that the supermarkets have dominated, and all the small shops in the parish centres are closed. So
You want to have a vibrant community, right? You want to have your local shops. And unfortunately, it's not only Jersey struggling with this kind of movement. You know, you see it in French, you see it everywhere. Okay. Is it a question?
No, it's a statement.
Okay, maybe then leave it for later, because there's still people with questions, I feel and see. And yes, sorry, thank you. And then the women,
I mean, mine's sort of again on behaviour.
Yes.
Interesting to know your experience, because we are like so heavily car culture.
Yes.
We have like the highest number of cars per household.
Yes.
Like, ridiculous. And so it would just be good, like, what was that shift and what was that change?
Yeah.
How do you bring about that behavioural change? Because it doesn't feel like that is changing. It's actually getting worse, I think. So how long did that take, and what are the things you can put in place to change it?
Yeah, and sometimes it can also be helpful to go away and then come back and then see the change, because it's difficult when you're there and it's frustrating. But I think also making change, it's not about only the traffic engineers. You also want to have people studying with a behavior background involved, actually. And for example, I think one of the main easy behavior takeaways is focus on the early adapters, focus on those that are willing and open-minded, and have programs and groups with them. And sometimes you also hear you need to kind of have that critical mass to create that tipping point. And I heard maybe one day about you only need 20%. So there are all these different tactics in there. But also really helps if have ambassadors or people which are a role or model or a leading position and put them on a bike and take a picture. And of course, not only the picture, they should also actually really cycle. But you could play around with that.
Sorry,
yeah.
Was there like resistance to pedestrianising places?
Yes.
And how is that? I think we'll
Yeah.
get a lot of resistance, and I'm wondering how you counter that, or is it just enforced?
Yeah. Yeah.
Doing that?
And so the idea is there it is. What we do is that we inspire with those conversations, because it's not doable to in 1 hour share everything. And then we can have workshops about this topic for a day or 3. Because yes, in Netherlands there's resistance, there was. We have the Fietsersbond, which is our cyclist union, which advocates for cycling rights, and it's still needed. And I don't think I already shared, but it's the first time in the Netherlands that the national government spends 1% of their all budgets on mobility for cycling, and this was an achievement. But it was because our cyclist union is still battling for it. So I can talk about that as well, and I can forward you emails which were once written against me about they didn't want to have to change, and they were really, really bad. Yeah. So unfortunately, yes, resistance is there, but it's something which you need to work with, I would say. Yeah. Then I think the gentleman, yeah? Yes. No, yeah, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, yeah?
I've got a question as well from the Netherlands as well.
Oh, yeah.
Cycling, of course, like you. Moving to Jersey, it's like, wow, a lot of people going to be cycling slower, which is not. But then how can you change the behavior from the car driver? Because I'm on my bike, I'm cycling from the east from Goree to town.
Yeah.
At the beginning, I even got a pink bicycle lane, and then all of a sudden I'm on the main road, but then cars just overtake me like this.
Yeah.
I don't really know how much space to give. How can you change the behavior that they actually know how to take over a cyclist?
Yeah, no, very interesting. And you could also talk with the gentleman behind you, because he just had a conversation with driving instructors, which is, of course, a very interesting way to deal with. I had an interview with someone from the US last Monday about the Dutch driving license and how that differs compared to other places, because we learn to take care to cyclists learning how to drive. At the same time, it could also be interesting to invite that person to go on a bike ride with you together and let that person experience how it is to be on that bike with the traffic around you. So I really believe in this local involvement, engaging with people, having the conversation and getting used to it. I know in London there was a campaign about truck drivers, putting them on a bike to understand how it is. Sometimes people really need to see and feel it. And I think there's no silver bullet or golden bullet, silver bullet. You need to do loads of different things at the same time, and then you will make it.
I understand you can't make the roads wider and stuff.
No, but for me, you shouldn't make them wider. I think that might be another one. That is this one. This is coming back to the professor from Leeds. This quote about if you want to decarbonize, get rid of or decline your car use. And he also says, therefore, if that happens, if you have less cars, there's less congestion, and there's no need to build more roads because you have less cars. I wouldn't widen your roads. I wouldn't make extra roads for cars, especially not on a small island. Only if really, really, really necessary. Maybe 2 more questions? Something like that, yeah? Oh, yes, okay. Yeah, for sure.
I've always been very impressed going to Amsterdam and continent generally, how comfortable they are with shared spaces in city centres. When we did a scheme, not me personally, but there was a scheme in Jersey which had shared spaces, resulted in an accident.
Yeah.
And there was a public outcry about how could the road engineers possibly have considered that this was a safe solution.
Yeah.
You must have accidents.
Yes.
In
Yes.
centres. How do you deal with those sort of criticisms?
Yeah, I think shared space can be really difficult. One of the examples I showed from The Hague, the Grote Marktstraat with the tram underneath, that's a very heavily debated shared space. And for me, the problem is there because it's a main route for cyclists, but when the shops are open, it's a main area for pedestrians. So thinking about this hierarchy, you have limited amount of space. So to who are you going to give the space? It intervenes because when the shops are open, it's full with pedestrians, but it's the main route from the city center towards the train station, which is heavily used. And there's no alternative for the cyclist. So what they should do is make an alternative for the cyclist because it doesn't work to share the space there. So sometimes you can share the space, sometimes not. It depends on situation. And in this case, when the shops are closed, you can easily cycle there. So it can also be a dynamic thing, if you understand what I mean, that the uses maybe change. In Delft, when there's a market on Saturday, I would never cross-cut the market square, but all other days it's fine. But then you need to have alternatives and different routes, and people need to know, okay, if it's a Saturday, I'm not going to cycle here, but if it's Monday after sports, I can cycle there. And shared space can be very, you need to be careful with it, in literal sense as well. But there's much to talk about that one as well. Yeah, I see questions coming up. Let's do the final one, and then I think you had one as well as a closure. Yeah, sure. Okay, let's go to that direction. Yeah.
I was just thinking about the linking public transport with, because that may enable more and more people to sharing that.
Yeah.
Trying to get bikes onto buses is a challenge.
Oh yeah.
So presumably there's public or there's supports.
Yeah.
To be able to do that. How do you go about?
Yeah. Interesting question, and it was actually mentioned with the Copenhagen example. Of course, Jersey is from a different scale than talking about the Netherlands. So I'm not sure if this fits one-to-one to your situation, but we can discover. In the Netherlands, we actually feel like that bringing your bike into public transport is not something that you want, because that space which your bike is occupying could be 1, 2, 3 people sitting. So for us, it's not a scalable solution. You can scale it. If your aim is we have more and more people on bikes and we have more and more people using public transport because this is a sustainable way of traveling, then I think your aim shouldn't be bring your bike on the public transport. But your aim should be, and that comes back to having these facilities, you need to have bicycle parking at every public transport stop. And you need to have a shared bike system or any other shared mobility system. So in the Netherlands, when you leave your house, you cycle towards the public transport stop, you use public transport, and there's shared mobility which you can use. So it's really trip chaining. And maybe for most of the people in Jersey, they will cycle towards the bus stop and then go into town and walk. For example, or if they live into town, they take the bus and they take a bike to tour around. So it's thinking about that. But maybe for an in-between, you could think about and experiment with how it is to bring your bike on the bus. But I think if you want to scale it up, that is not the advice from our side.
Do it in Vancouver. They just have bike racks on the front of buses.
Yeah.
Every bus has got a rack for 3.
But then how many spaces do you have for bikes?
On the bus?
Yeah.
I think you get 3 on the front.
Yeah. So, and then if you're the fourth person, you're... Yeah. No, you see it, and I mean, for example, traveling throughout Europe by train for recreational purposes, I'm a big fan, because then you can make a nice trip out of it. But I think for a daily commute, I think it can work with bike parking and shared mobility, especially during a certain scale. But there are other places experimentally differently. Yes?
So the transition in Holland back in the early 70s had a lot of resistance.
Yes.
The politicians trying to bring these new ideas in, they wanted to stone them. Now they're wanting to make stone statues of them and laud them and applaud them for their efforts. What message would you give to the politicians that are sitting here and I'm sure will then relay this to their colleagues in the Assembly as to how and what they can do to become those champions.
Oh, this sounds so great, to become a champion. Oh, yeah, I'm not in politics myself, and I would phrase this as strong leadership. And dealing with the resistance, but knowing you're doing it for the common good, you're doing it for your future, you know you have your vision, and you know you're doing it to make the world a better place, and that's where you believe in, and that's what you're going to fight for, and that makes you re-elected again, hopefully. And if not, you can go back home and say, okay, I did what I should do, and for me that's having the skill to dare, to do it, to go for it. And as you said, indeed, people had a lot of resistance and now they are being praised. And I would love to have politicians that dare to do this. I'm looking for them in the Netherlands as well, so it's always difficult to fight them, of course. But yeah, I think the gentleman behind you also had a question, and let's make this the final question for now. Yes?
Criticism and a challenge for you.
Yes, please.
You didn't mention cargo bikes. There was nothing in your percentages about cargo bikes. There was no pictures of cargo bikes. There were some lovely pictures of if I can finish, but there were some lovely pictures of some people with children on bikes.
Sorry.
So can you tell us how cargo bikes fit into your situation and how we can see the improvement? Well, that's not a cargo bike.
Oh, logistics. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah.
Includes getting rid of small delivery goods.
Yes. No. I will totally supporting you. So I will hope we can call. Oh, it's an argument then. But no, I might should have included them. But cargo bikes for logistics. Yeah. Sounds great. We're especially. Maybe we're more in our baby steps with it, but more and more we're having these zero emission zones due to air quality pressure. And there are more and more zoning about that which type of modality or which types of vehicles can enter the city centers when they need to be clean and therefore... Yes, for sure. Yeah, but I should have included perhaps a picture, and I'm a big fan, and I know about cakes delivered by a bakery via a cargo bike, and it's possible, and you can still hand them out, not being all shaken. There are lovely examples from all the goods which you can deliver with a cargo bike, and maybe you also know the International Cargo Bike Festival, which is held in the Netherlands every year when there's not a pandemic. It was just... in October, if I recall well, we were there with a stand and we were also presenting, and Jos Sluismans might be the person to go for because he's an expert on logistics and cargo bikes. But yeah, I fully agree with you, that's important.
Yeah, I like your idea about emissions control. That's a good way of getting some incentives.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely good to push for it, definitely needed. And also for decarbonization, it's I really, really want to thank you all for joining in and for the great questions.
Shelley, huge thank you for coming over and delivering that absolutely inspiring talk. I think it just goes to show if enough people want change, we can make it happen. And I really sense that there's enough people in this room that do want to make that change happen. So I think the answer is to do something to do with communication and collaboration and persuasion, and let's try and work on that. As architects, we would love to get involved in designing better infrastructure for sure. So thank you. And I'd just like to say that our next talk is on the 23rd of February, which is quite a while away. We've got Hanif Kara, OBE, who's a world-leading sustainability engineer. And I really hope you can spread the word and turn up for that and join in. We're going to be colonising the library now in St Helier from now on, so there'll be a familiar base every time, and hopefully there'll be more events like this. So I could just conclude by thanking Creative Island Partnership, Paul, for your support with this evening and continued support. But most of all, really thank you all for coming along and joining in. So thank you so much.